I hope you like gifts, because you're going to have no choice, but you see a lot of them today. So, I don't know about you, but before doing presentations, I feel pretty anxious. I have these emotions, my heart's racing, my palms are sweating, but it turns out, neurologically, this is actually really close to how you feel when you're excited. So, my brain's anxious, I'm going to switch it up. And it turns out that making that switch, your brain is processing those emotions of anxiety and excitement in a very similar way. Not quite the same, but close enough that I can say something like, I'm excited, and I switch from being anxious to excited. So, little tip for when you're presenting, that you can use science to change your brain from anxiety to excitement. This talk is going to be all about the science behind games and why games are great for us. And the best way to do that is to actually play a game, right? Okay, so got my timer. You're going to have 1 minute. We're going to play a ball game. I've never done this before, so if it works, great. If it doesn't, don't worry. There's still science that says that we did a good job. Okay. So I have these balls, they're very soft. If you'd like to play, put your hand up. Great, okay, but there's a little part that you have to think about. Okay, in order to receive a ball, you have to have negotiated with the person next to you to switch seats. As soon as you get your ball, you gotta switch seats, then you gotta turn back, because I can't throw balls very far, and look for another hand up, okay? So, catch a ball, switch seats, throw it to another person with their hand up. And we're going to play this for a minute, okay? All right. Okay, put your hands up if you want to play. Okay. Go. Go. Oh! Okay, put your hands up if you want to play, guys. I'm just going to throw them in and see what happens. Yeah, keep putting your hands up if you want to play. Keep going. Switch seats. Keep going. You got a couple more seconds. Okay. All right, time's up. Everyone get back to your seats. So what just happened? I didn't know how it turned out. This is quite a busy room, but based on neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy, this is what this talk is based on. And what happens when you play games with one another is you start to sync with them. And you start mirroring their faces. And I was watching your faces and you were smiling at one another. You were interacting. And when we do those sorts of things, we like people more. We're more open to new ideas from them. And we're more likely to help them. So it's kind of sneaky of me that I wanted you guys to sync with one another and with me so that you would be more receptive to the ideas that I'm going to be talking about now. Okay, so I totally made you guys change your brain. We're all synced as creatives, and this is really cool. This means that playing games in your workplace when you're challenging, when you're dealing with challenging situations, you can use games to help your brain sync. Pretty cool, eh? But what is a game? Games have a goal. They have rules. They have a feedback loop, so you know if you're doing things right or not. And they have voluntary participation. So things like the Hunger Games, not a game. I mean, Katniss said that she volunteered, but did she? I don't think so. Okay. The best game design, turns out, oscillates between too challenging and too easy. And you start with it really easy so that you can learn how to play. But you want to stay in the zone that keeps you there, right? You don't want it to be too easy, you get bored. You don't want it to be too challenging because then you get too frustrated. But games are actually just a tool within this bigger concept of play. And when we play as creatives, it is undoubtedly the most important part of the creative process. We try out new things. And Miguel Sicar, this book is amazing. He says that it is the creative process play is. So we should be taking it seriously as creative people. And play does matter. So when you do your bid work, try and think about this sort of play concept. But when we think about play and games, we think, oh, games should be fun. I'm going to say no. Games should be pleasurable. When I'm working on a game that is really difficult for me, I'm not having fun. But there's a reason I want to continue. And it's the same with the creative process. When I am working on a design and it's not going right, why do I keep working on it? It's because it's pleasurable. So this bigger concept of pleasure encompasses fun, just as games are just a small portion of play. Now, play can also be dangerous and addictive, destructive, but these are also part of this balance between creativity and destruction. And this is where we play in that zone in between. Now, most of the games we think of are what we call a finite game. You have a set of rules. You play within those rules. So a game of soccer, we know what the win state is. It has a set amount of time. And this is a traditional game. But we're not talking about a traditional game here. We're talking about living a creative life through play and through games. And there's this idea of an infinite game. So an infinite game, people play with the rules. The goal is to continue to play by whatever means they can. And you're doing it for the joy of playing. So James P. Carse, he's a philosopher, said that infinite games are more mysterious and ultimately more rewarding. They are unscripted and unpredictable. They are the true source of freedom. So when those people play infinite games, they're playing it for the sheer joy and challenge of it. So when we live a creative life, we too, I hope, are aiming to always keep playing. And how do we do that? Well, if you're like me, I try and stay in that middle zone, but we struggle. It can be difficult. And we struggle with boredom when things aren't challenging enough. And we struggle with anxiety and overwhelm when it's too much. And so we can use game mindsets to help us stay in this space, this special zone where we feel fulfilled. So when you came in here, this is my favorite GIF of all time, so I had to put it in. I don't think it's necessarily a superpower, but there you go. Just enjoy that. So when you were coming in, you had a name tag, and you were asked to think about what your creative superpower is. So my creative superpower, you may have guessed, is enthusiasm. I'm a decent designer. I think I'm pretty good. I'm a little bit cocky sometimes, but my power doesn't come from my ability to draw or to create something new. My power comes from the enthusiasm that I have. And so using a gameful mindset to try and activate that is really important to me. My friend Kate here says that I'm a gold star junkie, and I try and create challenges for myself to reward myself in everyday situations so that I can activate my superpower. Now, that list of qualities is part of the VIA Institute on Character, and you can go to their quiz to find out your top 5 character strengths, which is pretty cool. But I wondered if anyone here chose their superpower to be grit or perseverance. Anyone? Anyone pick that? Anyone think that they have that as a superpower? Yeah, you do, Kate. Okay, here you go. So, what I have here is a little jewel, and I've wrapped it up in paper and in tape Does anyone else want to play? Here, can we send this to the back? There's a guy back there. I don't know. Oh, whoa! That was good. Anyone else want to play? So, when I was coming up with this game, I played it with my family, my brother and my sister-in-law, and I'm like, what if I challenged everyone to unwrap this? Anyone want the last one? So the idea being, do we have grit and determinism in our lives? And I was going to get you guys to compete on it. It didn't end up being the right message that I wanted. But what I like about it is the fact that my brother and sister-in-law have amazing grit. And even though I tried to make them start playing another game that I could try out on them, they went back and they had to unwrap these little packages. They had to complete the task. So things like that are like small, silly ways. Do it. Get in there. Yeah, get in there. So we can do silly little things like this every day to activate your superpower. And this is going to be, I forgot to tell you that these numbers correspond to 10 things that I want you guys to do. So we're going to start at number 2. The first one was to think. Now we're going to do the activating the superpower. Okay, sorry about that. So living a creative life, we want to activate our superpowers. We have these strengths, these things that bring us joy. But we need to make sure that we use play in our everyday life to activate it, because these superpowers make us feel alive. And it means that we can use things like the language of games to stay in this sweet zone. So I gave you a silly grit game, but it's not really a game. But can't anything be a game? Right? Okay. So overwhelm and boredom. I don't know about you, but this is my creative game. Did you get in?
Got it.
Oh, you're good. Oh, she's got her teeth out. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So when we're living a creative life, when I care deeply about a project, this happens a lot. Who else does this happen to? Yeah. So back to overwhelm. And then boredom. I hate cleaning, so I make games of everyday life. So my husband drew me a star for cleaning up this corner that I'd left crap in for I don't even know how long. Okay. So taking this sort of gameful approach is really important. So I'm actually a designer. I'll tell you a bit about me. And I design games, board games, that turn into iPad games, kids games, that help people explore, fun games, and then more serious games that try and help people learn. And this one is one that I worked on to help people to have conversations about mental health and wellness. And then political games. But the most important one I want to talk to you guys about today is the work I did with Jane McGonigal on this game called Superpowers. Now, Jane's a scientist, and she is my hero. She is incredible. And she developed the Superpowers method to help people get over illness and injury. And it's all about taking a gameful approach to your life. Now, I was lucky enough to be the interface designer for the game a couple years back, as well as the app designer. And 400,000 people use that app to do, are you in? No? Okay, okay, so all these people use the app so that she can conduct research to see how taking a gameful approach to your life can help you get over things like traumatic brain injuries, which Jane suffered from, or an illness or an injury. And this book is the culmination of her research on how games transform our lives. Now, I'm not the expert, she's the expert. So if any of the stuff that I said today interests you, I highly recommend that you read this book. It will blow your mind. There's so much science behind how games transform our lives and our brains. So, my family, we play lots of games together, and we use it as a way to connect with one another. My friends and I, we also play games. A few people here today. But it turns out the most important thing is the reason why you play. So our game's a waste of time. We keep hearing about this research that says that kids that play games are less connected and they're having social problems. But then there's also the research that says that kids that play games are more creative, are better problem solvers, and are actually more socially resilient than those who don't. And it turns out that it all has to do with an escape versus expansion mindset. So playing Call of Duty because you hate your life and you don't want to be part of it anymore ends up causing lots of trouble. But if you play Call of Duty because you play it with your best friend and it's your way to connect with them, that has immense power and benefit. And it turns out that any game that you can play, you don't have to do mind-building games. And it turns out that traditional games are much better than mind-building games at getting these psychological benefits that we look for in brain growth. So how does this relate to everyday life? And it turns out that there's something called a challenge mindset that you have when you play games. And a challenge mindset, so think about when you play a game, 80% of the time you fail the first time. But do you quit? No. You're like, oh, I'm going to get it this time. Totally going to get it. I have this puzzle game that I'm playing called Cami right now. Oh, there's just one I can't get. But I'm going to get it tonight. You'll see. Okay, so how do we use that same mindset in our creative life so that we approach doing creative tasks in a way that we're excited about it? That we can stay in this sweet zone between that. So back to the infinite game that is a creative life. Who defines the rules? You do. How do you grow and how do you move along that scale? You create the parameters that make it possible. So think about Jackson Pollock. He transformed what he considered good art. A lot of people told him that that's not art. You're just throwing paint on the canvas, right? But all the time, creatives are redefining the rules about what is creative and what is your next level up, right? So I want to think about, when's the last time you leveled up? And do you make time in your everyday life to work on leveling up? So today, I'm leveling up right now. Here I am, up here, working on a presentation I've never given before. And it's also been one of the craziest couple weeks of my life because I also have my nonprofit, which is called Water Rangers. And the ice is melting and testing season's about to start. And we designed these test kits. And I have a whole bunch of new volunteers that I'm training. And every year I want to make my test kit better. And on my sort of creative journey, this is my level up, my space where I am more stressed and demoralized and excited and empowered. And it's the reason I wake up at 4 a.m. to think about the bag design and is this the right bag, and oh, what if we put this in this way? And it's the reason that this is the thing that keeps me going. So as part of this, it's really important that we celebrate the successes of our lives. In games, we have that feedback loop. It tells us when we're doing good. But in everyday life, we don't celebrate enough. And with my friends, we've been working really hard on making sure that we take the time to celebrate our successes. Because a lot of time I hear this, your job sounds so fun. But it's really actually a very stressful job. And I think that you'll agree that while it is the best in the world, it is also can be soul destroying. It can also be depressing. The pressure can get to you. You can feel demoralized. And so games that can help you live more creatively, that you can adapt, that challenge mindset, will help you overcome barriers and keep you in that sweet spot. Now, that doesn't mean you have to keep playing at full tilt all the time. Because think about games. When we play games, we have to keep recharging. When we don't take time to recharge, we get decision fatigue from distractions. We try and distract ourselves with social media, and that means that we can't get into that space. I am terrible at recharging, And I've been accused of trying to injure myself, of twist my ankle when I've been the most stressed, so that I would actually force myself to rest. And I think that when we're on this creative journey, that we need to make sure, just like in games, that we take time to recharge. Oh, there he is. Sorry. So it's really important to recharge for one reason. It's this flow. If we're tired and overwhelmed, when we can't seem to cope with the world because it's just too much, we can't get into this state of flow. We hear about flow all the time, especially as creatives, but we don't actually spend that much time in it. Because, we know that we should be getting into it more often because it's supposed to be this peak optimal creativity zone. The inner critic is silenced, and that's because your prefrontal cortex shuts down and time changes so that it either goes for longer or shorter. And when you come out of that zone, you realize you forgot to eat, and what you create is something more incredible than you've ever done before. But what's the best way to get into flow state? Turns out that scientists use games so that they can study the brains of flow state. And that's because it creates this spotlight of attention that regular everyday life doesn't. So your whole brain is being used up by the game. And they use things like Tetris because it uses your visual processing center, as well as you have to keep going. You can't just take a rest, right? So playing games helps you get into that flow state better than any other method. So how do we create space for flow? Is that a good one? You like that one? Yeah, we can do it. So when we look and we have too much in our life, we suffer from decision fatigue. And for me, creating space for flow means being diligent about scheduling space for it. Scheduling time where I say, I'm going to give myself the opportunity to get into that space. If everything else is accounted for, your brain can completely focus on that. And then you can go into this space, which is actually, this diagram is what scientists use to describe flow. So the optimal game design is also a flow state. Now, I want to leave you guys with some challenges that we can use 1 minute or 30 seconds to transform your mindset and help you to be more creative today. So, before you leave, I want you to have a think about what you can do today to activate your power up. And then I have a couple more ideas for you, so we're going to play a few more games, okay? All right. So the first one is to embrace constraint. When we have a blank canvas, we're often paralyzed. We don't know what to do with it. The game of golf. Why do we hit a ball with a stick? Like, surely I could just pick it up and drop it in the hole. So games make situations more fun. So having a gameful mindset and using constraint can be a great way to do that. So actually, I don't think we can do this. You guys don't have paper, do you? No? Okay, so you can do this with your coworker when you go to work. Okay, this will be your first challenge. I like to play a drawing game, and what I do is I draw a squiggle, and then I give it to the person next to me. I say, in as few lines as possible, make this into something. Okay? So we're not going to play that because you guys don't have paper, but I want you to take that back with you today. And what this does is it requires you to be challenged within constraint. And it just changes your mindset to that. So the next one we're definitely going to play, making a prediction. In everyday life can be quite boring and full of routine, and sometimes we need to just fire up our brain. And it turns out that making a prediction takes us from mundane to a more reactive state. You get a dopamine hit if you make a prediction and you're right, but you also get one if you're wrong, because your brain loves to learn. So when you're bored or frustrated, you can make a prediction and change the state of your brain. And it can be something as stupid as who's going to be the next person that texts me? Probably Manal. So we're going to play a game called Countdown. Does anyone here watch Countdown? As a British TV show? Yeah? Okay. So Countdown, the concept is you get 9 letters, and you have to use as many letters as you can to try and create a word. Now, before we start, we're going to make a prediction. So there's 9 letters. How long a word do you think you're going to make from the 9 letters I haven't shown you yet? 5, 6, would you hold your hands up? Make a prediction? I'm not telling. Good question. Good question. Okay, you got your prediction? Got it in your head? Okay, you ready? You're going to have 30 seconds. Oh, sorry. I wanted the music. All right. So in the game, they have paper and pen and stuff like that. So if you didn't do that well, don't worry. And I don't usually do that well either. But who got a 5-letter word or longer? 6 letters? 7 letters? 8 letters? Okay, 7-letter words. What did you get?
Peaches.
Peaches? And anyone other 7-letter words? Yeah? Yeah, that's good. Okay, so these are the 8-letter words. And those are the 7-letter words. So who got their prediction right? Okay. But here's the thing. We all got a dopamine hit from that just by doing it. So we all win. There you go. Okay. So the 9th thing I want to talk about is bringing the joy. And there has been a lot of research on what happens with extraordinary people and how they become that way. And one of the things that they do is they bring joy and surprise and delight to those around them. Now, I gave a challenge to the crew at Creative Mornings to take 2 minutes to try and surprise someone, to be sneaky and try and surprise someone. And Jess Kovar brought some homemade soup to her coworker, and she heated it up and brought it to her desk. And her coworker said that it made her day, but my guess is it made Jess's day too. So, bringing the joy and bringing joy to other people through being silly, for doing things like singing, for dancing with your friends, is what makes us feel alive and makes us feel human. And then the last thing is to thank your allies. Now this is Kate. Kate spent some time doing arts and crafts with me in the pub to help me try and form some of the ideas around this talk. And turns out thanking your allies and having allies in your life is so good for you as a creative person. And I want to give extra special thanks to Jane McGonigal and all her work that she's done in science and in games to try and transform the world. So thank you to Kate and Tabitha, Manal, Ollie, the Neville family, Natalie, Katie, and Kelly.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes before 10 o'clock. So I do have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. If anybody has a question for Kat.
Thank you again. I really appreciated your talk. It was awesome. It really resonated with me. What do you say to people, just curious, if you propose a game, you're like, guys, let's do this. And they're like, really? Like, that's silly, that's dumb, or why? Like, why would we do that?
Well, one of the rules of games is it's voluntary participation. So I activate my superpower, which is enthusiasm. And I hope for the best. So you don't want people to play that don't want to play, because it ruins it for everybody. And so I say to people, it's okay if you don't want to play. You can watch. That's okay. But offer them opportunities to join in later. If you force people to play, they bring their bad attitude there, and that ruins my superpower. Totally destroys me. And there's only so much enthusiasm I can give to an unwilling player before I get really angry at them. So that's something we definitely don't want.
Last one.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for your talk. So I have a question about the culture in the companies, right? So how we can use the game mindset when you have a team that definitely are playing their own rules, so game zero games, so they want to you lose for they win, this kind of thing. So how we can approach this with ideas in the in the job when we can say, oh, can help to manage that bad situation.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about infinite games, and you're talking about a win-lose. So in those situations, when you have people that lose and win, you're not playing an infinite game, right? So it's really important that you think about it as your own personal journey, and that you don't let their win and lose and their sort of closed-minded attitude infect you so that you can't continue growing as a creative person and do your best work. So sometimes I get clients and they don't have an open mind. That's okay. We finish our job and then I don't work with them anymore. So you really want to be in a zone where they're really open and receptive to your ideas. Sometimes it doesn't work out, but if it feels toxic to you, that's a signal that you should probably do something else. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kat. Round of applause, everybody.